Guys, we're already doing so well. We're doing so well. I couldn't find that button and I did. Believe in yourself. Okay, so this evening, we're going to be talking about letters from the Flea Market Love Letters archive. And I've already said my hello, but just kind of to cover all the bases, I'm Liz, and I'm the creator and curator of the archive. We are a digital archive of vintage love letters, and it's my pleasure to join you this evening to talk about all things letters, love, and love letters. It's a special thanks to journalist Danny Friedman for our opening artwork tonight. He had this piece commissioned to go with an article he wrote for American University Magazine on the archive. The article was called Sincerely Yours. I highly recommend it. It's quite a beautiful picture of kind of the years that the archive has been running and where we're going in the future. And I really like this piece because it is made up of all images that we've shared for the last 6 years. So it is an amalgamation of the project thus far. And I have even threatened to have it printed and hung up in my house because I love it that much. So this evening we'll be keeping it casual, but follow a light agenda so we can stay on track, so I can stay on track. We'll take a look at the archive as a whole, including the early days, the handling of the letters, and the archive today as it stands. Then we'll get to what everyone is really here for, which are the stories from the archive. I'm really excited to share this evening the two stories or two series that we'll be diving a little bit more into, which are the Kluppelberg and the Loudon letters, which have recently been shared to the archive, but I think you're really going to enjoy the deep dive that we've done here. So before we get started, let me just check if we're having any issues. Looks okay. All right. Nobody's waiting. Cool. So let's get started. So I'm Liz. I'm the face behind Flea Market. I'm an amateur social historian, a postbox fan, and an avid letter writer myself. Several of my pen pals are on the call tonight. Hi guys, how you doing? You can often find me digging in bins of yellowed paper and transcribing onion thin sheets of paper, or perhaps even writing my own notes or letters. And I, at the heart of this project, believe that everyone has a letter story. And I think that it's time to take them off of the shelves and out from under the bed, dust them off, and really celebrate the letters that are in our family pasts and in our pasts, and really celebrate them for what they are. So Flea Market Love Letters is a community space which is dedicated to the preservation and appreciation of the handwritten letter. And many of you here tonight are of that community. So I'm really excited to have us all together for the first time under the Flea Market umbrella. It's great to see you and great to have you here. So I'm very fortunate that I have the opportunity to travel quite a bit, and I've found many ways in which letters from the archive can come alive again in those travels. And I've had the opportunity to visit Switzerland with letters from the 1920s. I've visited famous landmarks around Paris and Dublin with postcards that picture them. And I have even visited the house from the series we shared on the archive, the Jess and Bess letters. This house, the letter that's pictured there was sent there 100 years before I took that photograph, the same month. So I really enjoy not only engaging with the letters, but engaging with them in real context. So whenever I can, I try and find a connection with a piece from the archive. So the archive. We are first and foremost an archive of vintage love letters that readers can find on our dedicated website. And this evening, we're going to look at how that archive functions. I'm going to try and do it briefly. If I skip over anything, feel free to grab me at the end and ask any questions. But this is totally a labor of love. It's a passion project. And I don't profit from the archive in any way. Any funds which we raise through the Write More Letters project, which I'll talk about a little while later, are entirely donated to charity. So I don't profit from the project in any way. I do this entirely out of my love for the letters. So as I mentioned, the letters that are featured in the archive, we have some 4,000 that have yet to be shared, will be found mostly from flea markets and online auctions and wonderful places like that. And many of them have been donated by friends, by family, and even by readers. Some of you here this evening may have donated something to the archive, and that's one of the really special community elements of the project. So forgive the terrible photo quality, but this is the first ever collection of letters that I collected for the archive. They're from the 1920s. This photo is the only photo I have to document the earliest days of the archives. This is from the 2010s. I was in high school at the time, and I often talk about the shoebox full of letters. And this is when I was putting this together, I realized you can actually see the shoebox full of letters in the corner. I didn't know I had anything about that, so a little bit of a spooky moment there. But this was the first time that I had letters, and I was laying them out on my parents' dining room table, putting them into chronological order, and really starting what would become Flea Market many, many years later. In this project, they were 1920s letters, and they detailed a highway patrolman named Raymond and his much younger question mark girlfriend Marie. And I had a great summer with them. My friends and I put them all into order, and we would read them and sort of talk about them, and we engaged with them in a really great way. And then school started, and we put them back on the shelf. They went on a shelf, and they haven't been touched since. They haven't yet been featured for the archive. And it's a goal of mine to kind of dedicate time to them being the original collection and putting them up properly for the archive. But this is the OG, the oldest picture that we have for Flea Market Love Letters. In 2017, Flea Market Love Letters officially started because I shared the Harry and Sandy letters. These letters are unique to the series, kind of like how almost every letter series is unique to the archive, but these are unique because we have two timelines. So we have 1940s letters, which are between a young English war bride writing to her boyfriend, Harry, who has gone back to the United States. He's an American serviceman. And then we have a number of letters from the 1950s where she returns home with their two children to her mother's house for the first time in about a decade. And she brings the girls, and it's actually perhaps I found most interesting in recent history. It's the week of Queen Elizabeth's coronation. So there's a lot of details in those letters. You can see from the stamp a lot of details about Princess Elizabeth's ultimate coronation, which, as we all know from recent history, was a long time ago. So it's very cool to hold those letters in hand. So I first started the archive by sharing pictures like this of the envelopes to Instagram. And then over time, I realized that people like me were actually interested in the contents of the letters and not exclusively just the aesthetics of the envelopes, which I thought was what was going to propel the project initially. We have letters in the archive from the 1910s, from World War I. These are the Bushnell letters. We have letters from the 1920s. These are the Stalker letters. Those are the series of letters that I took with me to Switzerland, the ones pertaining to Switzerland. It's about a family that goes on a European world trip in the 1920s. And these are a unique series because we actually have snapshots to accompany them. So there's about a dozen photographs that accompany the various letters from around the place. And this is a particularly wonderful series. I always get Agatha Christie vibes off of this series because the woman who's writing them is sort of explains all the people in their tour group, and she explains the knits of sweaters and the meals and the hotels, and it's just I always have a very strong Agatha Christie vibe when I go back to the Stalker letters. We have letters from the 1930s, like these from the Lindsays. These are really evocative, I think, because the 1930s are not a period we often think about. At least when I was growing up in America, we learned about World War I and World War II. And World War II got a lot more time than World War I. And the 1930s were the Great Depression. Everybody was sad and hungry there. When I started Flea Market, I really was drawn to letters from the 1910s and the 1930s. The letters from World War I and World War II are great to me, but I particularly, I'm really interested in this period of history. And in the Lindsay letters, we see a couple that are separated by the need to work. So her husband has gone to sort of work in a labor situation to send money home. And there's even a point in the Lindsay letters where she's writing to her husband and saying that she can't afford another pencil to finish the letter. So it really is a concept of something you can hold in your hands for that kind of lesson of the Great Depression happened right into World War II. Holding letters like this and reading them really adds a layer of context to that, which I think is missing in a lot of history textbooks. So what happens when the letters arrive? They could show up in shoeboxes, in grocery bags, in Ziploc bags, just loose. I could just get a handful of loose envelopes. I could find them in bins and barrels in antique stores. I can find them generally on flea market tables of military ephemera gentlemen. They're usually big, gruff men with mustaches and cigarettes, and they have all sorts of army paraphernalia. And if you just kind of sidle up and ask really gently, do you have any mail? They'll usually dig in the trunk of their car and come out with World War II or earlier letters. So that's always a fun juxtaposition to kind of have that conversation. A young woman going up and being like, "Oh, I really like your rifles. Do you have any mail?" But that's how the letters come into the archive. So they come in all kind of hodgepodge, and then we store them. So the letters can come in, as you can see in the picture on the side there, bundled together, paperclip together, all out of order, out of their envelopes, in their envelopes. Some of them haven't been opened from their envelopes in 50, 60 years. My job is to put them into chronological order as gently as possible to make sure that the goal is to handle the letters as least as possible. So I put them into these binders, my very sophisticated dollar store binder system. You may all admire it. I know it's so uniform and beautiful. We actually have twice this many now. So it has expanded past this shelf into several other shelves. But the way the letters work is they are recorded in an inventory. So L1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can go into a spreadsheet and that tells me that L1 and 2 are a certain series, when they're from, how many letters are there, have we shared them before, is there sort of anything to note, are there photographs, newspaper clippings, things like that. Just because when I started the archive again, we had the Harry and Sandy letters, and we had always had the Raymond and Marie letters, but as time grew and the archive grew and grew, as I said, we have probably about 3,500 to 4,000 letters in the archive at the moment, and so that takes a little bit of finessing to put them all into easily accessible order. So to share the letters, what I do is I photograph the letters. Many of you, if you came here from the Instagram or know of the Instagram, this is a very familiar setup. The letters on a tabletop. And I have been doing this since the first days of Flea Market. And it is the easiest way to do it. I photograph the letter flat. I photograph the letter with its envelope to keep track of the dates. And that's what goes up every week or every time a letter goes up, just a photograph of the flat lay of them. Once I have a series of letters all photographed, so I'll select a collection of letters today. Where are they? They're behind me. I selected a collection today that's coming up. And I will get them all photographed, and then I will organize them in a Google Drive folder, and then I will start transcribing. So transcribing could take any number of time. There was a series that was 144 letters long. It took 50,000 words of transcribing, and I think it took, I have the number down here, it took 144 letters. It took 133 typed pages and 57,000 words. So it took close to 10 months to share those letters every week on the archive. So that was a big collection that we shared. And when a post is ready to go up on Instagram, it's also up on the website as an individual post. So readers can read the letter in full there and read a taste of it on the Instagram. So the archive today is a beautiful thing. I never had the vision for the project. It was just kind of always, if you ask me, where is the archive going? Tomorrow it could be doing something brand new that I can't even picture. We've had the opportunity to be guests on podcasts, on television. We have a chapter in a book. We have, I have the opportunity to do radio. I did 2 pieces this afternoon to talk about handwriting and the handwritten letter. There's a very real energy behind the project, and I am just the spokesperson for it. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. It's the handwritten letter, and people want to celebrate it. So I'm really proud of the community that's come up around the letters and everything that we represent, in which we are. And I'm also really proud of how respectful the community is about the letters, because they are original primary sources. They are real people. They are real stories. They are absolutely as if you were to walk off the street tomorrow, you could meet someone from these letters, like I can have them in my office right now. So it's very important to me that they be treated as such. So the question often comes up, is there a book in this project? Is there my friend who's a videographer who does a lot of the video work for Flea Market wants to do a documentary. I've been approached by someone who wants to do a dramatic reading of the letters for Valentine's Day. Like there's so many different ways that people want to engage with the source material of this project that I can't tell you in 2 years there will be a flea market book, and I can't tell you in a year there will be a podcast. Like I don't have a plot for this. There's never been a plot for this. It's just a passion project. But I am always really grateful for the community that supports it, that shows up for it, that participates in it. And I can tell you that as long as I continue to enjoy doing this, flea market will continue. And I have no shortage of enthusiasm for the project. So she's got a nice long life ahead of her, as far as I can tell. Many of you here tonight may already have Write More Letters merch, or you may know of someone who has, or you may have been gifted some. I started Write More Letters project in 2020 during COVID. My husband designed the logo very politely for me because I walked downstairs and said, "Can you design me a logo?" while we were having dinner. I'm a great boss. And he did up this logo for me. We put it on the website. And I still remember being really nervous about advertising this because I don't make any money off of the project. But it was really important to me that these pieces go out there because 100% of the proceeds go to veterans. And it came at a point in the project where the project was starting to get a lot of eyes on it. And the project is fundamentally based off of veterans' letters. The majority of the letters are veteran letters. And so I really felt like I needed to do something for that. So Write More Letters developed out of that. And I remember the first time someone ordered something from the project, from the Write More Letters project, I cried. I did take a selfie of that for a very specific donation to the charity. You will be able to buy the selfie of me crying. Um, but I still get really touched when people buy and share their photos. A friend sent me a picture the other night. She was working late and she sent me a picture of a Write More Letters mug, and she said, "Finishing a report, but I have a great cup of tea." And I was just sitting here and I thought, oh, because it really means a lot to me to be able to support the veterans and to support him handwriting letters. So you've heard me waffle on now for a good little while. So we're going to get to the good stuff. We're going to get to the stories from the archive. I cannot tell you how obsessed I am with these two women that we are going to talk about this evening. I sat down, and this talk originally had like 4 different directions it was going in. We were going to look at a bunch of different decades. Then I fell down the rabbit hole with Thelma and Jean. And I think you're going to join me down that rabbit hole. So I hope you brought your flashlights, because it's about to get very dark down the rabbit hole. The first series we're going to look at are the Kluppelberg letters. Say that 10 times fast. Kluppelberg, Kluppelberg, Kluppelberg. These letters are written by Thelma to her beau Kay between 1920 and 1922. And I chose these letters because I have a real affinity for the 1920s. I love 1920s letters. And I think that Thelma absolutely freezes time with her jitterbugging, her young vocabulary, and her pen. And it's not often in our practice at Flea Market that we research the letter writers. That's why this talk is unique, because I don't often go into the details outside of what I have. But I started to follow my instinct that the Kluppelberg letters were going to be interesting to look into. They definitely were. We're going to have a good time. So I looked at the writer herself. And to find the writer herself, I went on Ancestry. And conveniently, this project means that I have access to a lot of details. I have access to first names, last names, siblings, addresses, all sorts of stuff that makes Ancestry way easier to use than my friends who do found photo projects. Those are oftentimes much, much harder to do. But conveniently, we have access to a lot of information. So in one of Thelma's letters from February in 1920, she writes to Kay, "Above all things, for you to call me a vamp, please. You don't really think it, do you? Why did you do it? I'm not one at all, because a vamp is one who encourages attention without meaning it. And I never encourage attention without meaning it. So there." I read this line from her and I was like, Thelma, girl, we would be best friends, because she absolutely takes him down and then builds herself back up into it. And I'm like, oh, she's doing great. She's doing great. A vamp in the 1920s was, it comes from the term of vampire. It's a seductress. It's a dark woman. She uses her wiles to get what she wants. And Thelma is a young woman from Georgia who moves to New York, and she does not do any nonsense. She absolutely does her own thing, which is why one of the reasons I love Thelma. In further on in that letter from February 1920, she mentions some excellent art that she attends. So she goes on to say, "I've seen one or two good shows lately and been to the opera twice. I saw and heard Caruso and Metzenauer in Samson and Delilah, then Farrar in Madame Butterfly. Both were perfectly wonderful, and so I enjoyed them so very much. Also been to several dances, and I am going to one next week. I'm getting into the swing again, and I'm really getting crazy about it again," which I didn't think I would ever do for a while. So the two women that I have there on the side are uh, they are Margaret Matzenauer, who was an Austro-Hungarian American mezzo-soprano singer, and Geraldine Farrar, who was a lyric soprano. So Thelma's mentioning of them and the theater scene of New York in the 1920s indicates that she had a taste not just for theater, but for good theater. So our girl was going out there and she was meeting her friends in her little bobbed haircut and her flapper dress and going to see award-winning sopranos, and then going for some speakeasy action afterwards. So I think if you're not in love with Thelma already, get on that train because it's leaving the station. The turn of phrase in Thelma's letters is something that I really love. An example from one of the older previous letters is that she uses the letter U a lot to represent the word you, which I think people think was invented with texting. It wasn't. Thelma was using it in 1920. And from the way that she describes her passion for entertainment, her enrichment, all of this to her boyfriend at the time, you are just very excited about it. So there's some really cute, obvious references in her letters that I absolutely adore. In this letter from March 21st, 1921, she says, "You, being Kay, are an angel for sending me Whitman's, and I am this minute enjoying some of it. But it purely is good." Whitman's is a chocolate company, which no longer exists. It was bought by another company. It's a brand that continues. Yes, I have contacted them. I have multiple times tried to get them to use this in some sort of marketing campaign because it's just an awesome historical piece to have something as iconic as Whitman's mentioned in a letter of Thelma's. So Thelma gets a little bit deeper here, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to share her with you this evening. Thelma works in some sort of role in an advertising company in New York, and she tells Kay about this visit to her office where she says, "Oh, I have some news. I got a raise. $5 a week raise. Doesn't that sound good? I surely did feel good over it and still do. I have been sketching lately with my pen and not using any pencil first. Don't you think I am getting pretty good? Someone came into the office the other day, a very well-known ADV man, and he was looking at my work, and there was a criticism that he gave me. He said that my pencil lines were beautiful, but I usually ruined it when I put in pen, or at least those lost the free east strike that I had in pencil. And he said that I would get over that if I would try sketching in ink and leave off pencil. I looked at him as if he was crazy, not thinking I could do it, but I tried it, and gee, but it's lots of fun, of course. It will be some time yet before I will be able to get it down smooth, but I'm on my way and surely glad that I did." So I love this piece because um, it's just awesome. She's a woman in an office in the 1920s, and she has an interaction with the superior that isn't creepy or skeevy. That does happen sometimes in the letters. You get kind of examples that it isn't new struggles women have been facing. And in this letter, this guy has said, tighten up your line work and you could really do something with this. And she's so proud of herself. She's really accomplishing this. Now, this gets to the point where a lot of people say, uh-oh, what happened to Thelma if you love her so much? Well, I really wanted Thelma to have a happy ending, which is why I don't usually look into the letters after I have them because I am terrified of sad endings. This one has a happy ending. So Thelma ended up marrying her boyfriend. She married Adolf Kluppelberg in the 1920s. And in her wedding announcement, she was described as the daughter of talented daughter of the Crawford Nicholas Pierces. So I absolutely fainted when I found this picture on Ancestry because very rarely do I get to put a face to the letters. I was already having a serious girl crush on Thelma, and then I found her wedding picture. And then I found an even better version of her wedding picture. So here you can see her. She's surrounded by her sister is on one side, Odessa. Odessa is mentioned in the letters. So that's another way that you can make those connections. Again, like I said, the letters have dates and specifics, and they'll mention birthdays and siblings and high schools and all sorts of stuff where you can sort of start to put the pieces together. But very rarely do you get to find not one, but two 1920s wedding pictures. So the last letter that I showed there was dated 1927, and we know that Thelma marries Kluppelberg because it's addressed to Mrs. A.E. Kluppelberg. It's written by an old tutor of hers. And the Adolf and Thelma married in 1925. They moved to New York from their home of Macon, Georgia, where Thelma was originally from. So they moved to New York together in 1927. And in the 1920s, they welcomed a daughter, Judy. Or no, it was the 1940s. They had a daughter named Judy because she's accounted in the 1950 census. So it could have been the 30s, but they had a daughter named Judy. We don't know Thelma's date of death, but we do know that Adolf died in the 1980s. And it seems to be that Thelma may have outlived him. But again, we don't have an obituary for Thelma, so I can't really place her. But we do know something. And I get a little bit choked up talking about this part because when I was flushing out Thelma's life, and I found her 1950 census, Adolf was listed as an architect. And Thelma, when this man knocked on the door 30 years after she had lived in New York, she listed herself as an artist. So that really just absolutely gives me goosebumps because she's just someone who I have absolutely fallen in love with. And if she's haunting my house because I have her letters, I hope she knows that I am her biggest fan. And I love that she has always and had always identified as an artist. So that's Thelma. So that's the Kluppelberg letters. I hope I haven't lost too many of you to my ravings about these guys yet. Our next series are the Loudon letters. So this is our last series for the night. And there aren't many in this series. They're written between 1945 and 1946. And so far as I can tell, they are written to Vera, who we'll talk a little bit about later. This is kind of a confusing series because they're about someone who's written to someone else for that person. So it's a little bit confusing, but they are a fascinating window into the post-war life for Americans and Europeans. So the Loudon letters are the story of these two young women and the individuals who interacted with them over time and what we can learn about them from there. So a number of the letters address Vera Loudon, as it says here on the envelope, and they're beautifully written. It's only when you begin to read them that you realize that it's very stilted English. It's very grammatical, but awkward in parts because it is someone who is not a fluent English speaker writing in English. So that starts to put a nugget in the brain of, okay, where are we coming from? And it really starts to paint a picture that unraveled as I went through this series. For example, from this letter from October 1945, the speaker, who identifies as a woman named Ria, introduces her letter as, "You will wonder to get a letter from a Dutch girl, but I have promised it to Tijin, and I like it very much. Do you know where Tijin is in Germany now? Will you write it me? Then I will write her a letter too. Since she left us, we did not hear anything from her. We like Tijin very much. We often went out with her. We have been to the motor races, and every evening we went for a walk with her. I will you how we became friends with Tijin. We went to school, and suddenly a girl came to us and walked with us to the building. I got a very nice souvenir from her. After that time, we saw her every evening. Before Tijin came, we had more than 55 Canadian soldiers. They had been with us the whole winter. Now I finish with best greetings." So this was the first letter that I read, and I was like, where are we going here? Because this author is very briefly fitting in reflections, memories, well wishes, context, bam, all right in one big chunk. We don't have, this is the letter we have. Also, my apologies because I know we're a global audience. I'm going to butcher some of these words. I very thankfully was actually taught what Tijin was, even if I'm saying it wrong, by a reader, because I posted this on social media. I needed help figuring out at the beginning. And as far as I understand it, as was explained to me, the T apostrophe represents of. So they're saying it's a fondness for of Jin. So at this point, and we know the letters have been written to a woman named Vera, but they're being addressed to this person, the sister of Jin. So we had a lot of unraveling to do here. So we found Vera. So Vera here, this is her 1942 school yearbook picture. She's from Mechanicsburg High School in Pennsylvania. She's one of 8, and she is the sister of Jin. So we were able to find Vera from the address, and then from there we were able to look at censuses and realize that she had a sister named Jean. So Jean is Jin, and Jean is trickier to find because she's worthwhile to find, but it was easier to find Vera because we had the details for her. So a little bit of detective work was still required. I found this letter and I started to put together some pieces. So in this letter, we promised Jin to write you a letter, and I do it with pleasure. The first time we saw Jin in the UNNRA camp in Nijmegen, she has often been in our home, and it was very sociable to be with her. We got a packet of dresses from her. It was very nice because we did not get anything when the Germans were here. We are very thankful. We have been gone out with her too. To the motor races, it was very nice, and every evening we went with her for a walk. Jin told us when she moved, she would go to Germany. Have you already got her address? Have not you? Will you send it us? Then we can write her a letter. So Ria, this is again Ria, is telling us more here, which I was able to use. We know that Jean is in some sort of capacity. She's in a care capacity in some way. She has gone to Germany. We know that from the last letter, but she's insistent that she's gone to Germany. And can she have her address, as well as the acronym for UNNRA? So in doing the research for this, I thought, well, that's very specific. That has to be something to find. And it was. So the UNRRA is the United Nations Relief Rehabilitation Administration. So this organization, and I'm going to look to my notes for this because there's a lot here that I think is important for people to know. The UNRRA, sometimes called UNRWA, it was established in 1943 to provide economic assistance to European nations after World War II and to repatriate and assist refugees who had come under Allied control. So it was largely dominated by a US presence, but the UNRRA represented 44 individual nations. Before it was dissolved in 1948, the UNRRA distributed $4 billion worth of goods, food, medicine, tools, and farm implements. And it played a major role in helping to return displaced persons to their home countries across Europe and in 1945 and 1946. So it fits perfectly into this window of the letters that are coming in the autumn of 1945, that a young woman has, in some capacity, a young American woman has been involved with displaced persons, and they are writing after her well-being. So I found this photo kind of exemplifying what the UNRRA was about. And then I found this photo, which is, oh, we're very excited. Technical difficulties. There we go. Then I found this photo from the World War II Museum, which are American volunteer women leaving to go for the United Nations Relief Administration. And they are leaving from somewhere called Newport News, Virginia, which, unless you're a history nerd or you've been paying very close attention, looks very familiar to an address where Vera Loudon's letters were addressed, to Newport News, Virginia. So that cinches the idea that Jean has, in some capacity, gone and volunteered to help displaced persons after the war, and Vera, much younger, has remained at home or is in some volunteer capacity in Virginia. In the final letter, log form letter that we have, this is from another woman named Mary. This is a longer letter and we're running short on time, so I'll just kind of summarize it. She talks a lot about how Jean played with her brother. Her brother's only 12, which is horrible to think about his age coming out of the war and what everybody must have witnessed, but he's 12. Mary is 17, the girl who's writing this, and she's writing to Vera to ask after Jean, to say that they so enjoyed her company, that she is of a family of, I think, 9, this Mary woman. And everyone knows Jean and wishes her well. And Jean brought them cigarettes, and will Vera send her cigarettes, and Jean and Mary will send a souvenir to say thank you for the cigarettes. So they're just absolutely incredible relics of the post-war era. So these are all up on the website, but these are under the Loudon series if you want to spend an evening with them. So here's Jean. So this is Jean's high school graduation picture. And I particularly love this. So this was 11 years before 1945. She graduated high school. So she was a young woman when she went off to do her volunteer work. And I think perhaps most apropos is her the description, her little note that's put with her picture, which is Jean's smiling face and laughing eyes are not an adequate disguise for the serious thoughts which pass through her head, but they'll always stand her in good stead. So if that doesn't give you goosebumps about someone who got on a boat and went and helped people who'd been displaced by war, go see a doctor, because it is hard to not be affected by that. The last piece we have about Jean is we did find her obituary. She did marry to another World War II veteran, because I see Jean as a World War II veteran. And they had a happy life and they did wonderful things together. But the only reference to her work with the UNRRA is at an early age, Jean left her Pennsylvania farm where she grew up and traveled to Puerto Rico. There, she talked her way into a civilian job with the military. And at the end of World War II, her job sent her to Germany to help repatriate refugees. So it's just a single line in her obituary that we have these letters that totally color this chapter in Jean's life. That obviously, you can't fit a person's whole life in an obituary, but it's a beautiful memorial to her and to the work that she did. So there you have it. That is this evening's deep dive in. We finished on a solid, we've got about 15 minutes before I would start to feel guilty for keeping everybody late. I would love, let me turn off this screen share so we can get a little bit friendlier. There we are. I would love to, I see we have some chat questions. We can go with those. We can, if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, if anybody just wants to introduce themselves, say how they found the project, we've got a little bit of time. So yeah, what are people in the mood for? Do we want to talk? Do we want to listen to more of me waffle at you? Feel free to unmute. You're very welcome. Do we want to hear me talk more? I'm really good at it. I do it a lot. Okay, we'll do some of the questions in the chat because I know you guys have been dropping them in there for me, so that's very helpful. Oh, Victoria, you didn't see images? You just had to, did nobody see images? Did I just talk at you for 45 minutes? Oh, okay. Wow. If you guys ever want to give someone a heart attack, that's a great way to do it. Whew. Oh, guys, I'm so sorry. Listen, all of this will be up as a blog post on the archive in the next few days. So I have all the images and things in there. The letters and things that are referenced are shared on the site. I understand that was a lot to have to listen to, and I personally apologize. And if you would like to send me your therapy bill, I will gladly expense that. So we have some good questions here. So we have, thank you very much, Kim. I'm glad you enjoyed. Aoife asked, have you ever used any transcription software? Hello, Aoife. Hi. She's just up the road for me. Great to have a local on the call tonight. I have not used transcription software. One, because a lot of the experience of working with the letters is working with them firsthand. So I find the process of sitting down and working on the letters very much the engagement element for me. Otherwise than that, it's just a lot of kind of editing pictures and putting them up on Instagram and scheduling things. So it gets very job heavy. But I have oftentimes considered trying to turn to AI for some of the difficult handwriting, which is another one of the challenges of this wonderful project. Sometimes you open a letter and you are 99% of it is what I call unreadable. And you'll see on some of the letters on the site that it says in brackets unreadable, because sometimes you just can't untangle, and it's a mystery for the ages. Okay, thank you, everyone. Oh, we found someone found the tombstone, so that's exciting. I'll have to maybe you heard about how I like to go to. Ah, thank you, Tina. Thank you. Am I saying that right? Tina? Tina? Oh, you're from me to you. I remember you, Tina. We're good. We're good. Yeah, no, if you can maybe yeah, do you want to let us know the pronunciation? You want to unmute? Anybody is welcome to unmute, by the way.
So yeah, that's Nijmegen.
Nijmegen. Okay. Am I saying Tijin right, or is the T silent?
Well, that is something I don't know because
Mm,
I'm Flemish and that is a Dutch
mm, mm,
letter.
mm.
So I wouldn't know, but yeah. So
Okay.
there's a few things that are different, and I'm not going to say that I am an expert there.
It's okay. It's like when people ask me questions about Canada, I just go, yeah, yeah. But no, it's good. We're cousins. We're cousins. We know a little bit about each other. Victoria, if we had Canada questions, I'd serve them over that way. It's often best to just say, I'm gonna double check. Cool. Well, thank you very much. Thanks so much, guys, for coming tonight. I don't want to hold you on for much longer. There's been really lovely comments. It's so great to see you here. And it's so awesome to 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 show there's a suggestion to show the letters to pharmacists to see if they can detangle some of the terrible handwriting, which is definitely something I will keep in mind for future. I made the mistake of I went to the Postal Museum in the UK, and I made the mistake of blowing my own trumpet that I could read any handwriting. And then you don't do that at the Postal Museum because they have literal exhibits about difficult handwriting. And they were like, "Oh, can you read this?" I was sitting there and I was like, "No, I'm sorry, miss. I made a mistake." So I no longer say I can read all handwriting because I got called out on it. So we walked that back. Guys, it's been so great to have you here. Listen, you know where to find me. You know where you are. Many of you are pen pals. If we're not yet, and you'd like to exchange a postcard or a letter, find me on Flea Market's Instagram. We can see what we're doing. Best of luck. Thanks so much for coming this evening. It was really this. I wasn't letting myself be nervous about this, but I felt way better when you were all here. So thank you very, very much. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Farewell. Thank you, guys. Where am I going here? Oh, I have to save the recording because I learned this mistake.